right, guys, welcome to the channel. Today we are going to tackle an IBC tote and we're going to make that into a cold plunge. Yes, that's right, we're going to make an IBC tote cold plunge. And the reason I'm making this video is because there are not a lot of good quality instructional videos on YouTube to show you guys how to make or turn an IBC tote into a cold plunge. So that's what we're going to do here today. Please stick along with us. I'm going to try to make this as detailed as possible, but at the same time, try to save a little bit of your guys' lives and not make this a 3-hour video. So there's going to be a lot of speed ups, but I'm going to show you step-by-step things on how to turn a tote into a cold plunge. So step one is you got to get a tote. Where do you get them? I got mine from my local airport. My dog. All right, let's try that again. So I got my tote at the local airport. They use these in the winter to store, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. It's a type of alcohol that they use to de-ice the planes. And this tote cost me $100. Actually, I take that back. I got two for $100. So this one cost me $50. So you're gonna have to shop around. You can probably find them on Marketplace. If you're in an area where they have farmers and fertilizers and like feed stores, you can get them there as well. Or you can look online, but $50, pretty good steal for the price of a cold plunge. So first thing you gotta do is you've gotta remove these guys right here, these brackets. They're held on, I took the screws out already. They're held on by a Torx bit right here. You pull that Torx bit out and then these guys just slide right out like that. And then once you've got those out, you can flip the tote upside down. I'm gonna roll it over to the side here, kind of like this. And now we can pull this out. But before I do that, I wanna show you guys what I did here on the side of the tote. So you can see I've taken a Sharpie marker and I've marked where I'm gonna cut on the tub itself, and I've got a straight line. And I wanna try to maximize, because I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'5", I wanna try to maximize the depth of my cold plunge as much as I can. And so I'm trying to use as much of this plastic as I can. So what I did is I kind of measured and I ripped a board down to 5 inches. I'll go grab that and show you what I'm talking about here. I just took a piece of scrap lumber that I had laying around and I ripped it down using my table saw to 5 inches. And then what I did is I took it and I set it on that bar. And then I just took my Sharpie marker and went along and marked both the posts that I'm gonna cut and then also the tub here. So what are you gonna cut those with? You need to cut them with something. Obviously, I'm probably gonna use a cordless grinder with a cutoff wheel on there, and I'll cut those off. And then I'm gonna pull the tub out first so that I don't cut holes into the tub while I pull that out. And then we're gonna cut the tub itself using a jigsaw, and that's gonna be step one. So stay with us. I'm gonna go grab my tools. We're gonna pull this tub out and we're gonna start cutting. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and pull the tub out of this guy, and then we're gonna start cutting. Pretty easy. So a couple things we want to do is I definitely want to save these corner pieces, but I'm going to try to take them out here just so I can wash this thing out, clean it off. The tub may or may not have these, just based on what you get. You might have crossbars that are square, and mine are rounded, which I actually prefer the square ones because then you can screw through them a lot easier. So set this aside and we're going to go ahead and start cutting on these guys. What I've got is I've just got a grinder with a cutoff wheel. So I'm going to speed through probably this portion of the video, but I'll kind of show you what we're doing. I'm just going to get on there. Probably should grab some safety glasses. Find your good safety glasses when you need them, but it works. All right, so I'm gonna use our battery powered skill saw here. And hopefully this works, it may not. Is cut off, and we're gonna wash her out. So hopefully you guys can take a look here at what we've got. Not rocket science, wasn't too terribly hard to get off of there. And I'll scoop this guy back up and wash it out. So a couple of options that you've got for, tilt this back up so you can see me here. A couple of the options that you've got for the tub itself. Several folks have used a pond liner on the inside to coat it and to kind of give it that nice aqua green color. Because one of the issues that you're going to have with using an IBC tote is that once you get water in this thing, if you didn't put any kind of pond liner in there or cover on the outside, you're going to see the bars through the tank here. This tank's pretty thin material, and or you might see the spray foam as well. So what I'm going to do is I might spray paint the outside of it. I don't want the paint on the inside, so I may rough it up and spray paint the outside of it aqua colored, or I might just wrap it in a black plastic so that you can't see through that. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to play around with the black plastic first because I have some from another project that I did. So I'm going to try that after I get this rinsed out and see what that looks like, and we'll move on to the next step. All right guys, I'm getting ready to wash this out. Now you may get a tub that has different types of chemicals in there. Obviously try to get a tub that has some sort of food grade safe material inside of it. Like I said, this one had a type of alcohol that the airplanes use for de-icing their wings, and it's actually a food safe alcohol. So I'm not going to get crazy about scrubbing this out. You can use just some Dawn dish soap, a little bit of white vinegar, and even some Simple Green to rinse these out. And depending on what it looks like, I may do that at some point before I actually put it all together. But I'm going to rinse it out, see what we got dealing with, and wash off some of the other pieces here, and we'll get going. By the way, it's February in Montana, and we're having unseasonably warm weather right now. It's probably in the, I would guess somewhere around almost 40 degrees out probably. This thing is actually, it's not terrible, but it's definitely dirtier than I thought it was. So I think I'm actually gonna get my pressure washer out and pressure wash all the inside and outside of this guy out, and pressure wash this tank as well. Since we're not freezing today, got a pretty nice day. It's a perfect day to get this thing washed out. So I'm gonna grab my pressure washer. Probably not gonna show you that. You guys don't need to see me pressure washing this thing out. And we'll skip on to the next step after that. All right guys, now comes the next step, which is probably gonna honestly be about the worst part of this entire project. And that is I have to drill holes through these round posts to get my framing mounted up. I don't know if I'm gonna do every single one or if I'm gonna do every other one. And I'm certainly not gonna show you how I'm doing that. I'm obviously just using a drill bit, and I'll be drilling through each one probably, or every other one, to mount up the framing on this. These are round posts, so it's going to be a pain in the butt. But if you have a tote that has square ones, or if you have the opportunity to look for a tote that has square ones, definitely pick the square ones. I have seen people use zip ties to hold the framing to the tubing, and then drill through the wood, but that's just as time consuming. So I'm just going to get at it and start drilling these guys, and we'll start working at them as we go. not too terrible. I'm not marking the height or anything like that. Alright guys, we got the tops all drilled, and I actually decided to drill every single one just because there's not a crossbar on the top here, and I want to make sure that those are nice and sturdy. Now we've got to do the bottoms, because I'm going to put a piece of framing around the bottom of these as well. And in my particular IBC tote, there's a little bit of a groove right here, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill through right at the top of that groove so that I can countersink my screws this way back into the boards. You'll see what I'm talking about. I've already drilled 2 of them here going, and so I'll show you what I'm kind of doing. I'm going to do every other one on this one because this bottom one's not going to need as much reinforcement. Alright guys, so the next step here is I'm going to take my grinder, and I don't think this is 100% necessary, but I'm just going to take off some of these sharp edges from where I cut these off and on the back side where I drilled through. Again, the plastic tub isn't really going to be touching that, at least I don't believe so, but I'm going to grind them down just because I can. You could probably use some sanding blocks maybe, but you're going to want to need some sort of a grinder to take those down. Alright guys, so now we're going to start measuring for the framing that we're going to use. And these crates, they're kind of, you can see they're kind of bowed out, and obviously they have these round corners. You might be able to see a little bit better here. So they're bowed out. So when you take your measurements on these, you want to measure from the middle of the crate across. So you can see here I'm measuring from the middle of the crate, and I'm right at, turn it upside down so you can see, 41 inches there. And so I'm going to add 1.5 inches to each side for my 2x4s. So a total of 3 inches to 41 is going to make that 44 inches is what we're going to need to measure that guy at. And then we're going to do the same thing here again, measuring in the middle of the crate. We're right at 47.5 inches. And so we're going to add 3 inches is going to make that 50.5 inches. So we got 44 and 50.5. I'm going to double check my measurements here. This could be harder to check on the bottom and make sure they're the same. Yep, we got the same there. And let's measure this guy. Yep, got the same there. So 44 is going to be our width, and 51 is going to be our length. Now, it's actually going to be changed. So what I'm going to do is I want my end pieces here. The long side is actually going to be 50.5, just like we measured. But the inside one is going to be our actual measurement of, I think I want to go back and measure it again. We'll double check this. It's going to be 41, roughly. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut these end pieces first. I don't know if I have enough lumber. We're going to go in and do that now. All right, guys, so one of the things you need to do when you get your lumber is you need to look down your lumber, and obviously try to buy lumber that is as straight as you can get it. This guy is really straight, but if you've got a piece of lumber that's bowed, obviously you can use that a little bit to your advantage on the crate because they're round. So if it is bowed, which this one is just a little bit on this side, this is the side that I'm going to mount towards the inside of the crate. So we're going to get this guy cut up here. And remember, we measured him at 50.5 inches. All right, so we're going to measure this guy at 50.5 inches. Make sure that's on there. And 50.5. here. So one side is done. Let's go out and get this guy mounted up. All right, guys, so I'm using some 2-inch torque screws, and that's what I'm going to use to secure the frame to the wood frame to the pallets here. Now, one thing I gotta do is gotta grab my tape. All right, so I know that I need 1.5 inches to stick out on each side, roughly, and so the next thing that I need to do is probably find kind of where this is going to center up. So to do that, again, I need to make sure I look at my board here. This guy's pretty straight. So what I want to do is I'm going to secure these first holes here. And I'm not going to care whether this is too level or not. I'm just going to make sure that it's pretty consistent. But the thing that's really important is to make sure that we have it the right distance this way. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a cheater board, and I'm going to go grab some clamps. We're going to clamp on a cheater board on this side. So bear with me, we'll be right back. All right, guys, you can see what I've done here. I've got clamps kind of holding these boards on. And if you don't have this many clamps, which I think right now I'm using 2, 4, 6, you certainly don't need this many clamps, and you could use zip ties or whatever to hold this up. But remember, my measurement for the long side was 50.5, but as you can see here, because of the bow, how much extra I've got here. So what I did in this case is I went and took my measurements because I want to make this as square as I can. And so I measured inside of the board here like that, and I've got 46 3/4. And so then I go over to this side and do the same thing, and I'm right at 46 3/4. So it's the same. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lop off this little section right here, about a half, maybe 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll measure and cut for this side. I don't know if I have enough lumber for this side. I may have to hit up the lumber store. I got to go there this afternoon to get the foam board anyway. So let's get these up and ready to go. All right, so we've got this cut down, and it's pretty close to where I want it. But the one thing I want to show you is that you want your board to sit just a little bit proud of the top of the metal frame here. Might be easier to see from this angle, so that obviously these aren't sticking up above the 2x4 here. So we're gonna go ahead and get those screwed in, and we'll move on to the next one. Show you that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start with these center ones. We're gonna get those in first. Pull it in. We're gonna leave them just like that. All right. Perfect. Now, I'm gonna measure and see which ones are my longest piece, because this one might be long enough to fit on that side, and I've got an extra piece over here. So let's get that checked out, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, guys, so what I've done here is I showed you before that I measured inside between these two, and I got 46 3/4. And so did the same on this side, got 46 3/4. And so what I did is I've gone ahead and cut this side. I didn't think I was gonna have enough lumber, but I decided to do my design just a little bit different, and it's actually gonna work out perfect. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and make a mark here on this guy. We're gonna cut that guy off, and I'm gonna put that this is the north side for me, so I have a reference. I'm gonna make a mark on this guy, cut that off, and this is gonna be south. And this one can actually be secured at this point. We can go ahead and screw this in, which I'm gonna do, so we can use these clamps we need to here in just a moment, and then we'll be able to cut these and get those screwed on as well. So let's do that. Let's get that other short side mounted up here real quick. All right, so we're gonna repeat this exact same process on the bottom of the crate now. I gotta go to the lumber store and get some lumber today because I'm all out, and I've got to get our insulation and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned. It's probably gonna be tomorrow before I get back to this project, or maybe even next weekend. I'm not sure. I gotta do some vehicle work tomorrow. But the one thing I want to leave with you at this point is that you may have, as I do in this case, a couple of these end pieces or these metal bars that may be higher than the rest. I try to get them proud on all of them, but this one right here is a little bit high. So I'm gonna get my grinder and grind that down so it's not sticking up above that, because we're gonna have some trim that's gonna go along the top of that, and we don't want it rocking or anything like that. So thanks for watching, stay tuned. The next step you're gonna see is I'll have the bottom piece on, and then unfortunately I discovered when I washed out my tub that, and I completely forgot that this IBC Tote that I bought was not two that I got from the airport. Those two I used in a different project. This was a third one that I had gotten from off a marketplace, and so it had some other kind of chemical in it that left a rubbery residue that was very inconsistent, and it looked horrible on the inside. So that means I've got a lot of work to do in sanding it out. I'm going to sand it out with 80 grit sandpaper in my orbital sander. I actually started that a little bit ago just to see how it was going to go and if I could get it out. It is coming out. It's just going to be a time-consuming process. So I've got to sand that down. Once that happens, I'll get the tub wrapped in black plastic. We'll get it stuffed back in here, and then we're going to insulate it, and I'll show you that. So stay with us. All right, guys, so we're back today, and we're going to start putting the bottom frame on. Obviously, you see I kind of got it roughed up here in terms of, I've already cut everything to length. I've cut them exactly to the same length as the one at the top. So we're going to go ahead and get these drilled and screwed in. I've already got this one drilled. You'll notice that one's not level much fine. We want to get these butt joints all squared up first and mounted, and we'll kind of work our way around the end of the frame. None of these are actually screwed into the frame itself yet, so we'll get to that part in just a moment. Be. So the reason I went and go ahead and screwed all of the frame pieces together is because this thing is not very level, and I want to make sure that I get all of these. Part of the some of these 2x4s were a little bit twisted, so I wanted to make sure I had nice square corners, so that when we go to do the outside part of it, it'll make it a lot easier and it'll look a lot nicer. So now what I'm going to do is just go around and hopefully kind of get it level all the way around. Shouldn't really need these clamps as much anymore. Still kind of hold it down where I want it. And then we'll go ahead and screw from the inside. So one thing I am going to have to do, guys, is the valve box is going to be right here. So what I'm going to end up doing is probably just using my either a jigsaw or my skill saw to cut out this section where that valve will fit. And I'm going to frame that in, so I want that to be, I wanted to do it that way. Alright guys, so here's what we've done so far. I just wrapped black plastic around it and pretty much just wrapped it up like a present with this black plastic wrap. I just got this from my local Home Depot store. I think it's probably like, oh gosh, I don't know, 7 mil black plastic. So got the inside all cleaned out. It was quite the chore, actually. I ended up having to use 3M remover and sand it down and scrub it out, and it was a pain in the butt. So this side will have the vent on it. We'll cut that out later. But as of right now, it's just all wrapped up, and we're gonna go ahead and put it right back in the frame there. All right, guys, so one of the things that I ended up having to do, because my the plastic liner is a little bit taller than where I cut off these posts, I ended up having to unscrew this top frame piece from the inside all the way around, lift it up, and I actually took the liberty of leveling it with my level to make sure that it was nice and level here. So it's all installed. It was kind of a pain in the butt to get the tub back down in there because the plastic kept wanting to catch on these screw heads. And so the plastic did rip in a couple of spots, but that's okay. Again, I'm not really worried about that. I'm just trying to keep it so that it has a nice consistent color on the inside and you can't see all the dirt and weird stuff on the outside. So now the next step is to insulate this guy. I still do have to cut in this valve right here, and so I'm gonna mark it and probably just use my jigsaw to cut this out, and then I'll actually probably frame up and around that. But I'm gonna start working on getting the insulation. Now the insulation that we're using is gonna be this stuff right here. This is 1 inch thick, and I was gonna do 2-inch thick board because it's got a much higher R value. But when I mounted up these 2x4s, I was actually gonna try to find 1.5 inch foam board because the 1.5 inch would match up with my framing here. But one thing that I did not take into consideration is that these bars stick out, and so you actually lose a little bit of space there. So I'm gonna spray foam in between the foam board and the tub here, but I can't do that until I get the foam board on, and the 2-inch is way too thick. It sticks way out too far. So the 1-inch actually sticks perfect. So that's what we're gonna go with. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to cut this foam board. Obviously lay it down on a nice flat surface. You're gonna need a Sharpie, a good utility knife, a 4-foot level, obviously a tape measure. Now, I know that the distance between my framing on the pallet is 29.75 inches. I'm gonna measure that, just double check, because I cut this a little bit ago, I cut one. Yep, so 29.75. So I'm gonna make a measurement at 29.75. 29.75 right there. And I'm gonna do that every couple of feet. 29.75 down this board. 29.75. 29.75. All right. Then I'm going to take my 4-foot level and my utility knife, put it on my marks. It does help to have a longer blade utility knife. This is an Ulta knife. And then you don't have to cut all the way through, but obviously don't cut yourself. Cut probably halfway through on this first pass. And it's better to be just a tad bit big than too small. Alright, so we're through there. Now I'm going to make another pass with my knife here. And we are through. Alright. Now, you're going to need 4x8 sheets of insulation board to go around. One piece will get 2 sides. It'll get a long side and a short side. So now I'm going to measure my long side again, which I believe is 49 3/4. Double check on this side real quick. I know you guys can't see me. I'm out of the way. But 49 3/4. So, same thing. Grab my marker here. And I'll make a mark at 49 3/4. Do the same thing on this side. 49 3/4. Level. Put it on the marks. And all right. So let's take you to the crate here. All right guys, so you can see that I've already got two sides of this on. This will go on the back. But one thing I want to show you is this piece is a little bit tight, so it's kind of bowed out. What I'll end up doing is I'll end up putting some 1x4s down across here and holding it in place while I spray foam behind this. You might ask how we're going to spray foam behind that, and I'll show you here in just a minute. But basically that's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and flip this around so you can see the other side, and we'll do that side. Okay, so you can see we've got two sides here, and I'm just going to lay this up here to see how it fits. Just a little bit loose. We're going to use duct tape to, and all I'm doing is kind of pushing it up so that it's flush with this edge right here. Now, that gives me a good edge right here to mark. That's why it's really nice if you cut it on the big side. Because then you can kind of wedge it in there and it fits a little bit better. But that's okay. That's not going to stay in there. That's all right. Alright guys, so we've got all of the foam board on. It's just kind of roughly sitting in place. But what I'm going to use is this extra wide duct tape. This is duct tape 357. I don't even know where I've got this. I've had it forever. So it's probably 4 inches wide. And I'm going to go ahead and start taping up the seams. And I'm actually going to start with probably the top here and get it just kind of held on to the wood. And this is just kind of hold it in place. Wow. Get the corners and everything sorted out. Alright, so we're back guys, and as you can see I have the tote actually removed back from the crate, and I have the black plastic removed. Honestly, I just wasn't a huge fan of what the black plastic looked like through the plastic tote here. So we're going to go ahead and paint this. I picked up a couple of cans of this satin Rust-Oleum. The color that I'm using is Oasis Blue, and it's 2X Ultra Coverage Paint and Primer Plus. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing spray painted up. Just on the outside, I'm not going to paint the inside. And I'm not going to video all of that. I might give you a little time lapse here so you can see that. But that's what I've decided to do. I may put the plastic back on over the top of that. I'm not 100% sure yet what I'm going to do, what I've decided to do, but for sure going to paint. So let's get to rolling on that. All right, our tote is painted and almost dried, but not quite. And I've decided I'm not gonna put the plastic back on it. But one of the things that I wanna show you is, so we've got all of these voids in between basically each one of these grids of the frame for this crate. And so we're gonna fill these with spray foam, but the only way to fill those with spray foam is to do it with the tub in here and with the tub filled. So the issue that you have is that spray foam expands and contracts, or it doesn't contract, but it expands. And so you want to use a spray foam that has the least amount of expansion. So I picked up the spray foam that has for cracks and doors, and you can read on the can, it's a red can with a yellow lid, and it says for cracks and doors. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna drill a hole in each one of these squares, in each one of these cavities, towards the top of the cavity, and so that we can spray foam into that cavity and fill it up as the tank fills up, or as the foam flows, it'll fill up and then it'll come out the hole and seal up that hole. So we're gonna just go ahead, and I've got a bit here on the screwdriver, and I'm just gonna literally towards the top, kind of in the center of each one of these, just drill a hole just like that. And again, that's gonna fill up, you'll see the hole on the outside here, that's gonna fill up with spray foam. And so I'm gonna do that all the way across for each one of these squares, and also in the corners, so that we can get the corners filled. And that'll just help it so that obviously we can fill those cavities up and we don't get condensation in there, if that makes sense. All right, guys. Okay, so I want to show you what I've got going on here, guys. So one thing that I've done is I've taken, and obviously we've installed the liner into the crate, and I've taken, and what I did was I purposely left these corner screws out so that I could secure the tub to this, because I want to be able to pull it in tight on all the corners. So you can't see it on that side yet, we'll talk about that, but I've got screws on each of the corners that are holding it to the frame and to the wood, so that the tub is nice and secure to that. Now, what I've got going on this side is, this is a piece of Trex decking. It doesn't matter what color you choose, obviously you choose the color that you want to go with, but you can see that I've got it secured here. I've held with clamps, and I've got my square, my framing square there on there to make sure that this surface here is flush with the wood here as well. So what we're gonna do is, now I'm gonna screw this into this studs as well, and I'm gonna do that here in between each of these metal frames. And the reason why this isn't all the way to the corner is because it's kind of as far as you can, and you're going to see here in a minute we're actually going to frame up over this as well. But one key important thing that I did, and you can choose to do this if you want or not, I actually ripped down this, you can see that there's two different colors here. That's because I ripped down this, this is a 1x6 piece of Trex decking, and I ripped it down one ridge. And the reason being is I'm actually gonna put another piece of siding over this, and it's gonna hang down over this lip just a little bit. And I'm actually gonna mount an LED light strip on the bottom of this piece right here, all the way around the entire tub. And I want it to be recessed just a little bit. So it's gonna be recessed about a ½ inch, so that you can't actually see the LED strip when you're sitting in the tub. It'll be up underneath, and that'll make more sense when I've got it done. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pre-drill this and screw those in, and then we're gonna do all 4 sides of this. Okay guys, so what I was talking about before is that pretending that there's actually going to be another piece on the inside here that goes all the way to the corner, and it'll sit flush like that as well. And as you can see here, this piece is wider than this piece, so that light will sit back underneath here behind that track there, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these pieces on, get those screwed on, and then that'll make a little more sense here in just a second. All right, so here's what I'm gonna show you what I've done for the framing. So remember we had the inside piece, which is this piece right here. That's the inside piece. And now we have secured an outside piece over the top of that. And you can see how it makes a much cleaner looking corner because obviously these corners are round. You can see the tub here is round itself, but now we've got a nice square corner. And then we'll obviously cover the top of this also with our Trex decking to give it a nice finish on the top. If that makes sense. So the only one I've got left to do is that side there. Obviously you can see I pre-drilled all of these holes so that the screws sit flush. And then I'm using these decking screws, which have a much smaller head on them, for the outside pieces. And they also get countersunk. And so looks like I missed to put one in there and there. But yeah, that's kind of what I've got going on here. Kind of gives you an idea. Obviously, this side is not done. I'll go cut this piece here next and we'll get that one installed and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so I've kind of mocked up a corner to show you what the corners or what it will look like with a finished top here. I ran out of material, so I got to pick up a couple more boards for that. And we've got to foam it anyway. But that's kind of what it's going to look like on the top, if that makes sense now. So you've got a good idea of what that corner will look like and how it's trimmed out. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll get some gray caulking and I'll caulk that gap all the way around. I haven't decided whether I want to leave a little bit of a lip on the inside so that it's kind of like that maybe, or if I want to, I may end up doing it like that so that there's a little bit of a lip on the inside. Just haven't decided yet. I kind of like the look of that lip, but I also need to make sure I want to have enough lip on the outside here for trimming on the outside. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. I think I'm going to have to run it pretty much flush, which is okay because then the cover will fit down in there really nicely as well. So that's it for now. I'm done for tonight. The last thing that the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fill all these gaps up with spray foam. And remember, we're going to fill all these holes with spray foam and get those all filled up so that we got a nice, we can fill in from the top here as well. Get that all filled in across there and get her vacuumed out. And we're getting one step closer to plumbing. Okay, so we're inside the tub. I'm on the drain side right now. And our LED strip is gonna run up underneath this channel here and around, all the way around the tub. So one of the things that I didn't take into consideration until just now was that you can see how these pieces overlap each other in the corners. This corner, not so much, but all the rest of the corners do for the most part. This one I got mocked up with a piece of board here, but it also overlays itself. I did end up having to sand this down because this was just a little bit proud of the outside hinge here. But anyway, one of the things that I've got to do is I've got to notch this out so that I can run my LED strip all the way around. I've already done it on this side. You can kind of see there where I've cut off this edge right here. And I just used my cordless multi-tool to do that. So something you need to take into consideration if you are going to install an LED light in here, two options obviously are you can make this backboard the same size as this one, and that way it'll be the same all the way around and you can just run it on the bottom there. Like I said, I wanted mine recessed so that you couldn't see the LED strip, and so because of that I'm gonna just notch this out right here with my little multi-tool pretty quick. So I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. All right, hopefully you can kind of see that I've rounded out this corner here so that I can get the LEDs across. Getting a little bit of a glare there from the light, but you can hopefully see that side as well. So just got them cleaned off there with the multi-tool. And now the next step will be to, we'll drill through, probably through this corner right here, because this is the side that's gonna have all of the drain, or all of the plumbing, all of that stuff on it. And so I'll probably drill right out of the corner here and run that cord down and out and mount it to this side of the crate here, but it'll come up in through the tub here. Like I said, I'll probably end up drilling through right around in there somewhere, poking that thing through and running that. So here are the RGB LED pool lights by Shine Decor that I'm gonna be installing in the tub here. And this is kind of the next step for me. I'm gonna get these in. I'm gonna get the temperature, the Inkbird all mounted up, and then we're gonna go ahead and get in the inlets and outlets installed so that we can go ahead and get this thing foamed up and then continue working on trimming it out. And those are the next steps, but I wanted to show you what we're installing here. Again, this is the RGB pool lights. It's got the power cord connector. It's got a really long extra cord here if you need it, but I don't think we're gonna need that at all. So it looks like, I'm guessing by the looks of that, probably a 3/8 to, yeah, probably a 3/8 drill bit, but I'll let you know for sure what size drill bit we need to get that through the tub here. So, all right, so we had a slight change of plans. I was gonna install the LED strips, and I got everything out, kind of laid out, and trying to figure out how I was gonna get it in and installed and all of that stuff. And I discovered that it actually has an external receiver that needs to be on the outside. Originally I was gonna kind of maybe just tuck it down here in the corner or hide it up underneath in here. But it's gonna have to be on the outside so that the remote will work. And so that's actually kind of a good thing because it allows me to, I'm gonna have to get up kind of some of the exterior stuff done before I mount that, which is totally fine. I'm gonna have to drill through it anyway. And so we're gonna go ahead and install the jets. The jets that we're gonna install, I'll grab that really quick, is gonna be this guy. I purchased these off Amazon, and again, I'll put all of the links to the products that I'm using in this build in the description. So that's this guy right here. They're gonna be installed, there's two. They're basically gonna be installed right there, one there, and one there. The location of these isn't incredibly important, other than you want them to be higher than your drain plug. And I've heard mixed reviews about whether it should be above your water level or below your water level. For me, I'm gonna build steps on this side that are gonna hold the plumbing and all of that stuff and have that out of sight. And so if I go, I don't wanna go too high because then I won't be able to put my other step here. And even right here, I might have to move it down a little bit, I'm thinking, just because that might be in the way of my top step. I need to measure on the exterior, but ultimately I'm just gonna use a hole saw bit to do that. You can buy these at any hardware store. This is a 2.5 inch hole saw bit to fit this outlet. So 2.5 inch hole saw bit. I'm gonna measure this really quick just to make sure from the top of the tub we're at 14 inches, so that's okay. So I think that'll work because I think my steps are gonna be about 8 to 12 inches. So my top step is gonna be 8 inches below this guy roughly. My top step's gonna be right there. So I could move these up just a little bit, but I think that's a good spacing. And I also think that that's pretty good height as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those drilled. I'll show you how we're gonna do that. We're actually gonna run the drill in reverse. Well, we'll drill forward to get this bit through the plastic. And then once this bit gets through the plastic and these teeth start to grab on the plastic, we're gonna run it in reverse so that these teeth don't grab the plastic. Otherwise, it's gonna be really hard to drill, and I'll show you that. All right, I actually moved my dots just a little bit over to make sure I had enough spacing for the plumbing. So, all right, here we go. So now that it's through, now I'm going to run it backwards, which is not working at all. We're just going to go really slow forward. We're going to go really slow forward. The backwards wasn't working as well as I was hoping. Almost through. Did not plan very well for that. All right, so mistake I made. All right, well, we're just gonna have to fix that. Is I hit a post going through, so that's okay. I'll just probably have to cut that out with my multi-tool just to make sure that we have room for the plumbing. It looks like I'm barely gonna close that crossbar, but I'm already gonna look, and of course I'm gonna hit one. No, get down, buddy. Down, get down. Looks like I'm gonna hit one on this side too. So, all right, gotta rethink this for a minute. That's okay. This is why I'm doing it, so you can avoid my mistakes. I should have moved them in a little bit closer, but that's okay. Like I said, I will be able to cut that out, hopefully with my multi-tool. It's gonna be a pain. I'm just trying to decide if I want to drill this one in the same spot, because it's literally gonna hit a post as well. Right in the middle one, or if I want to move it over so that I don't have to deal with that. So I think what I'm going to do first, because this hole is cut and there ain't much I can do about it now, is I'm going to try to cut that post and make sure I can cut it. We'll see how difficult that is before I drill this hole, because I do want them to be symmetrical. All right, so good news and bad news. The good news is that it wasn't terribly difficult to cut with my multi-tool from the inside. However, the bad news is that I had to remove the styrofoam on the back here, which really wasn't that difficult. I just had to peel the tape off and cut the tape in a couple of spots. But what I'm gonna do right now, one thing you need to make sure you do is do a really good job of cleaning up around the surface of the hole here. Make sure you get all the little jagged pieces of plastic cleaned up, which is not incredibly easy. Actually, that's probably about the hardest thing. You just want to make sure you don't have any real sharp pieces of plastic that could interfere. And then I'm going to put a really good bead of silicone on here. Get this cleaned up a little bit. Using my utility knife here. It's kind of a pain in the butt. The other thing that I ended up having to do was I had to use my cutoff wheel to cut the plastic so that, or the metal, so that it was big enough for me to get the nut on, and you'll see here in just a moment. So I'm going to take some silicone and throw a bead of silicone around this guy. And it's going to be messy, that's all right. I really want to get this thing so that it's nice and sealed off. And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside, and we'll clean it up and make sure it looks real nice. All right, so got the inside piece here. We're going to go ahead and slip that in. Now, the other thing I need to do carefully is put these gaskets on here. And I actually have to screw this in from the inside because that bar is in the way for this nut to spin. It's kind of a pain in the butt. We'll get it on there. see what I'm doing. I'm just spinning it from the inside right now. Kind of get it tight on there. And then I'm going to grab my channel locks. We should be able to tighten it from out here now. Maybe, let's see. You want to make sure you get this nice and tight. Not let this guy leak. Alright, now I'm going to get some towels and figure out where I set them. And I'm going to clean up the inside first. Get a nice, good bead of caulk around there. Make sure that it's all the way around. And this is something you could do at the end as well, but I want the caulking actually behind the nut here too. So it's kind of what I'm doing on the inside is the same as I'm doing on the outside. I'm just cleaning up this caulk around the edge here because I do not want that guy to leak in any way, shape, or form. Now, that's going to be good enough. I could probably maybe try to tighten that just a little bit more, but I don't think that I need to. But I might as well try. Oh yeah. It's not spinning on the inside, which it's not. Might as well get this thing nice and tight. Nice caulk around that edge. All right, so there's one. So now that I had to take this back piece off, I'm actually going to do the same thing. I'm just going to cut this one, since it's pretty much right in the middle of where that other jet's gonna go, which is fine. It's not gonna change the integrity of the cage or anything like that. Just makes it a little more difficult. I'm not gonna video that, you guys can figure out how to do that. But basically I'm just gonna lop it off here and up here again. All right, so got both of the inlets, inlets I should say. Got them both plumbed in, got them drilled in. Got them all glued in here, and so the next thing that we're going to do is fit the threads and the fittings for the remainder of the plumbing here. So the internal diameter of these particular jets is 1.25 inches. So what I've got, is 1.5 inches. So I've got 1.5 inch adapter threaded male with 1.25 inches female. So I'm going to thread that on there like that. And then the next piece that you're going to need is we're going to have to glue this up. So we've got that guy. The next thing we got is a reducer, and it's got a female thread on this end, and this is 1.25 inches on the exterior part down to a 3/4, I believe. 3/4 insert. So that'll go in like that. So we'll glue that piece in, and then the next piece in this series is going to be this guy. There's unfortunately, oops. Of course I got to drop it. Peel the sticker off here. So the next piece is going to be 1 inch down to 3/4. So that guy will go in there like that. And then the last part of this equation will be this elbow right here, which is a 3/4 threaded elbow into this guy. So that's kind of what it'll look like. And then this will flow out over into this one, and there'll be a T in the middle, if that makes sense. So this will be 3/4 inch pipe here. So basically you've gone from 1.5 inches down to 1.25 inches, down to 1 inch. This is still 1.25 inches here, down to 3/4 into this guy. So you may have to play around and get different sized fittings. I just took these to the hardware store with me this morning so that I could figure out what exactly I needed. So I'm going to slowly put all those together. I'll probably just do a time lapse of that because you guys don't need to see me do that. The one thing I'll show you really quick is I'm going to use this mega tape. on each of the threaded sections, and we're gonna make sure we get those really, really tight and snug so we don't get any leaks in any of that, if that makes sense. The last thing I'll tell you real quick too, I use this adhesive pipe insulation. This is what I'll be wrapping around all this stuff once I get it all plumbed up. And I wrapped that around these metal parts here so that when the tank is full and it's pushing against this, I didn't want any sharp edges hitting the tank here and causing any holes in it or anything like that. All right, so you guys can see I've got the foam board back installed. I've got our plumbing installed to this point. These are just kind of hand tight, actually a little bit tighter than the hand tight, but they're not permanent, so that we can get the rest of that plumbed in. But now we're going to start spray foaming this guy and filling it up. And I wanted to show you what I did here around the valve. So again, this is going to be the valve side where all the plumbing's at. I basically took some of this thicker tape again and I kind of dammed off in here and taped up, and hopefully you guys can see that, so that it's all sealed off, so that when we start spray foaming this in these holes, none of the foam will leak out the bottom here. And then I've done the same around the edges here, all the way around, so that the spray foam won't leak out of the bottom. And then the last thing that I'm gonna do here is we're actually gonna fill these holes up with spray foam. We're just gonna shoot a little spray foam. We're gonna start at the bottom and just fill them all the way across until they're all filled. We don't want to put a lot of foam in there, just enough to insulate that bottom. We're going to put more insulation over this, so I'm not too worried about that. I just want to make sure that we get the spray foam in these holes and make sure that we get this all dammed off, because spray foam is sticky, nasty stuff. And the last thing we'll do is we'll set it on the plastic here, upright, when we start to fill it from the bottom up. So once we get these done, then we'll set it on the plastic and we'll start filling up the other side. The spray foam that I'm using I think I told you earlier that it was blue can or yellow can with a red lid. It's actually the blue with the yellow. This is the lowest expansion pressure. And so we're using this so that it doesn't bow in our tub. Okay, I wanted to show you guys what I've got going on here. So I've just got some stringers in here, just a bunch of scrap wood, and then obviously some weights. I put the weights in the bottom to keep the spray foam from expanding and pushing the bottom up, since we just filled the bottom. Now we're gonna start filling the sides all the way around, and I don't want that spray foam to push in. So these are just little stingers in here to keep the spray foam from pushing in and expanding out into the tub here. Obviously, if you don't have weights, you could fill this up with water. I'm in my garage here, and so I don't have water out here to fill this. I'd have to hose it from quite a ways away from my outdoor sprinkler or from my outdoor hydrant. So I don't want to mess with that. I just threw the weights in there for now, and that'll work. But if you didn't have weights and you had this kind of somewhere close to where you were going to put it, or you had close to water, you could fill it up. Obviously, you'd want to make sure you don't fill it above these unless you've got those plumbed in. I don't have mine plumbed in yet, so the water would just run out. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so we're spray foaming here, guys, and I've got 3 sides done. And I've just got to do this back side here, but I'm going to show you what I've been doing. I'm using a headlamp so that I can see down in there, and I just light it up, and I do each section, and so you can kind of see down there, there's some foam down in there. But what I'll do is I'll obviously start in the bottom hole first and watch until it fills that cavity down there. And then I'll move to the next hole and kind of the same thing. I'll just keep watching as it fills up. Now, the one thing you can do is you can kind of move that straw. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll stick the straw in, kind of wedge it over to one side, spray foam, and then pull it out, and then wedge it over to the other side and spray foam so that it fills that whole cavity up. And then you're just gonna work your way all the way up this row, and then I'll start over here and I'll work all the way up this row, and then the same thing over here. I've found that it takes about 1 can per cavity. maybe to 1.5 cans per cavity, and then the corners take about 2 full cans in each corner. So right now, I think I went through 15 cans so far, and I picked up 12 more just in case, plus I got to do some more on the bottom. So that's exactly how we're filling it up. Like I said, you can kind of see down in there. We ran out of spray foam, so I had to go get some more, and then I'm filling that up. And so once I get that filled up, you can see over here, a lot of times we just cut it off with a knife once it gets full. Okay guys, so I wanted to show you what I've got going on here now. The last video we finished spray foaming all of the panels, got all that done. I'll show you a close-up of that here in just a moment. But the next step, so I spent the morning trying to figure out how I was going to insulate this area. And I had originally thought about spray foaming it and then putting 2-inch foam board over the top of that. And I still might do that, but I think I'm going to use the 1-inch foam board instead. But I needed a way to kind of keep it all in there and not come out these sides right here. So I decided to build another frame around the bottom, which I probably should have done in the first place. It'll help keep this thing a lot more level, but ultimately, the main reason that I did that, not only to give it a little extra support, give me some more stuff to nail my trim onto, but I'm also gonna take something similar to this. I'm not gonna use this piece, this is just this cutout piece right here, but I'm probably gonna mount something similar to this on each of the corners so that I can mount casters on this guy, because I want this thing to be movable. It's going to be pretty heavy, obviously, once I get it completely built, but I want to be able to mount casters on here at some point. And so I needed a way to screw and mount those on there, and this will give me a nice, good, sturdy surface to do that. So my plan now is I'm going to tip this thing up. And we are going to spray foam the bottom of this all in, and I think I'm going to use the foam to kind of hold it in there. But we'll take a video of that here in just a moment, but I wanted to show you what we got going on here. Also on the top, you probably noticed that I put, I think it's 5/8, no, I'm sorry, it's less than a half. So it's like probably 3/8 maybe. Let's just see how thick it is. No, it's coming in at a 1/2 inch. Anyway, so I used plyboard on the top. I'm not going to use that on all of the sides. As you can see here, this side is still foam board. The reason that I put the plyboard on this side is that this is the side where all the plumbing's going, and I want to be able to screw into something and hold the filtration system on there. So this is actually probably going to be mounted somewhere right around in there, and I needed something to screw this to. There will still be siding on this and all of the other faces. I just needed something to screw into that was a little more sturdy than the siding. Now, if you're doing something different with the siding other than the laminate flooring that I'm using, there's so many different options, you guys. You could use 1x6 pine tongue and groove to go all the way around this thing. That's what I was originally going to do, but when I started doing the math, the vinyl flooring was actually cheaper, and I don't have to stain it, and it's weatherproof, it's waterproof, and so it just made more sense to me to do it that way. I'm trying to do this on a budget as much as I can. There are some things that obviously you can save money. You don't have to frame this around here. I ended up having to go to the lumber store. I picked up 2x6s. I ripped them down with my table saw, because I think it was about 5¼ inches from the bottom of here to the bottom of the frame here. And then I actually had to run them through my planer as well, because they were too thick. It was sticking out way out here. So I cut these down probably about a 1/2 inch on my planer. I recognize that a lot of you guys aren't going to have these kind of tools, and so just understand that you don't necessarily have to frame this up. The one alternative that I consider doing is that you could use our tape. You'd have to buy, you have to have plenty of roll of this, but you could actually just wrap this around the frame here, all the way around, and that would give you a nice cape dam to hold in that spray foam insulation. And then when you trim it out, you just run your trim all the way to the bottom so that it's covered up and you can't see it. And if you've got your ice plunge in a place where you're not ever going to be moving it or anything like that, then that's totally fine. You don't have to worry about putting casters or anything on the bottom of it, and you don't need to frame the bottom. So I just decided to do that because, again, I want to try to put casters on here at some point, and might as well. It was like 16 bucks for the lumber. So, and I have the tools obviously to mill it down and rip it down to the correct length. So that being said, let's finish up with that. We're gonna flip this dude over and let's get spray foam. Okay guys, now on to the fun part. We're cutting and installing the vinyl plank flooring. And I've got 3 pieces up here, which you might be thinking, oh man, I missed how to start that. But it's actually really easy, and I'm gonna show you how to do that now. So the very first piece, you wanna make sure that obviously get it nice and square. This particular paneling has, and most paneling is very similar, it's got a lip on this side with a lock edge, and then it's got a recessed groove on this side with a lock edge. So this is the edge that we want on this side, so that this piece is going to snap in and lock to that place. So what we did for this very first piece here is I took my table saw and I ripped off this little lip right here so that this edge is flush to this side, if that makes sense. You don't need a table saw to do that. You can do it with a skill saw, but you are going to need to take and rip off this edge if you're going to use the vinyl plank flooring. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this has got a nice consistent gap here on the bottom. We are going to trim out the corners and the top and bottom, but one of the unique things is that you've got the same little lip right here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to measure our height. So I'm going to go ahead and get this piece in place and kind of lock in spot, but not perfect. But it's nice and flat on the floor, and it's nice and kind of level right there. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to mark along this back edge here. So make sure it's kind of lined up. And all I'm doing is scribing along the back edge using this as my level. So I'm scribing it just like that, and you can see here I've got a nice mark. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to my miter saw, and I'm going to cut this lip off, and then I'm going to cut this section off. That's what this here is from, one of these pieces right there. That makes sense. And so that when I come back out, I'm going to have this nice little gap at the bottom that's going to be the same. It's going to be consistent on every piece. And I'm going to have this cut off right here. So let's go do that. We'll go get that cut, and I'll show you how we're going to measure and install that next. All right, first things first, again, we're going to cut off this little lip right here. I'm just going to drop my miter saw down and run it flush up to the blade against the side. That section's off. And now we're going to cut our excess off. Same thing, I'm going to run my miter saw right up to my line. That's it. Okay, we've got our piece cut. Now we're going to get it snapped into this groove. Now the one thing that I'm doing intentionally is I'm not nailing this board in on the bottom. So this one's nailed in, this one is not nailed in, and I'm not going to nail this one in until I get this one installed. And the reason being is that, again, we've got a little bit of a bow here because of the round cage, and so it just makes it easier to install and get seated correctly to do it this way. So I've got a couple extra pieces here. I'm going to lay one down so that I can kind of set it on that piece. I'm going to start at the top and make sure I'm just about level, and then I'm going to work my way down to the bottom and just get it kind of snapped into place there. You may have to use a rubber mallet or something just to make sure that the top is level, because again, we're going to trim this out and we want to make sure that, just a little bit, we want to make sure that our trim is going to sit flush on the top, And then we also want to make sure that it's snapped all the way in. Now, it's in on the bottom, but it's not in on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this guy right here. Nope, I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to snap it right in this edge right here and use my mallet to tap it in and make sure that it gets nice and tight. And it's still, there we go. Now it's in. Again, make sure that we're flush on top. Pretty close. Oh, too far. Darn it. A little bit of a fail there, but that's okay. Just gonna have to slide it back up. And same thing. I'm gonna have to tap it down just a little bit more. There we go. I like that. It's nice and tight, so we're gonna go ahead and air nail that one in. And I'm just using 1.5 inch 18 gauge brad nails, and that looks good. I like how tight that is, so I don't want any of this to come out. Now I'm gonna nail this bottom one. And I'm gonna make sure that we're pushing up nice and tight. And now we can do the same thing with this piece. We'll go cut, measure, and get it installed, and it's that easy. All right, so the next step in the process, guys, forgive me, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Came down with a cold over the weekend, is trimming out the top. We got to trim out the top before we can trim out the sides and corners. And I've already got this first piece started here, which you should be able to see is installed. And pretty simple. I want my corners to line up right with these corners. And so ultimately, we're going to be making 45-degree cuts. You can see I've got a couple of different pieces laying here of this truck's decking that I used to just make sure that my corners were all going to be 45s. Because this crate is not square, and because I framed it out, it's not perfectly square, so you may have to fudge your angles a little bit. So that's what I use these leftover scraps for, is just to make sure that my angles are correct. And then I use these extra scrap pieces, these two in particular, again, to kind of make sure that my corners line up the way that I want them to. And this way I also know what my measurements are going to be for the inside. So I've got the first one installed. It's all set up, screwed down. All I did is use a drill bit. I'm drilling through the corners. You can see I've got a screw mounted right there. These boards seem to be a little bit warped on the ends, so it's perfect because it screws that end down. And then this one I've already cut. It's actually going to go in this position, but I've got to go and take it down. I always cut, so here's a trick for cutting these corners, is always cut them a little bit long and then slowly take like a blade's width or even less of a blade's width off of this length until you get it to fit where you want it to fit. So that's what we got to go do. I'm going to go trim this guy off about probably 1/4 of an inch, maybe between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, but I'm going to start off just really slow, trimming it until I get it exactly where I want it, and then I'm going to screw it, and I'm going to work my way all the way around. So one thing you can do is raise your blade guard, lower the blade, and then slide the board up against the blade and kind of push in, and then when you release it, making sure that you're square, you're probably going to take off just about a blade width. Now, I'm still quite a ways off my mark, and this mark is just a guess, but I still want to take it down just a little bit more. Might have have been a touch too much. Let's try that. All right, let's go test it. Okay, so I'm using my test piece to test my corner here. And if you actually look on the back side right here, see if I can get you a better close-up angle. See that gap right here? That little gap right there? And if you look on the inside, on my stool here, you'll see the same thing. You can see my pencil mark, hopefully, in the shadow there of the camera, but you can see my pencil mark. I still need to hit, if I hit that pencil mark, I'm gonna be right on the money. All right guys, so I ended up just having to take just a smidge off that corner yet again, but it's exactly where I want it now. So I am going to drill and screw this guy in place, and I'm gonna mark here on this 2x4 where I want that screw to go. And I literally went through that thing right there's where I want it. So I'm gonna make sure this corner is nice and tight where I want it. Find my mark. Drill that out. And the reason you want to pre-drill this is because it's plastic. So if I just tried screwing this in, it's not gonna go very well. It'll actually, the plastic will bind up in the threads of the screw and you won't screw it in. Yeah, that tightened up pretty nice. Not perfect, there's a little bit of a gap, but I'll caulk that gap. All right, let's go do the other side. Okay, so here are our corners and our trim piece, our top trim piece. Really happy with how well those turned out. They're pretty dang tight. You really can't get it much tighter than that. Got a little bit of a tiny gap on this one, but the other one looks good as well. So that's it. There is the top trim piece all done and installed. Alright guys, so the next part of this project is finishing out the trim here on the tank, and I'm using some stuff I picked up from my local Lowe's or Home Depot store. This is just basically I think it's hemlock or hickory, maybe, I'm not sure. Actually, I think it's hemlock. But it's already made corner trim. It's a little expensive. I think this stuff is about 10 bucks a stick for an 8-foot section of this, but that's what I put on the corners here. I've already stained them, got them stained with polyurethane so that they're waterproof. And so basically I just installed them. I did the corners first, and then now I'm installing the sides. The sides is the same thing, it's just a piece of 1/4 inch thick. Same stuff, kind of a lath type of trim. And I've got them already cut and marked for which ones go there. Now I'm just air nailing them onto the sides, both top and bottom, and then I've got some pieces for the trim around where the plumbing will go as well. So that's what we're doing right now. To get those nailed up. I'm not going to show you that process. It's not difficult to figure out. Obviously, you just measure in between, and you could optionally, if you wanted to, instead of using trim nails, you could use glue or something along those lines. I had thought about doing a glue as well, but I want to make this so that if I ever need to, for whatever reason, pull off the siding to get into the spray foam or to get into the plumbing, I want to make it as easy as possible and not have to destroy a bunch of stuff. And so trim nails are really easy to just pop out and use. So that's what I'm doing right now. I've got all these already stained up and ready to go, and now they're just getting air nailed on. And the next step will be to caulk the insides of these gaps in the corners. And then the last thing for today, probably, I might start work on building the lid. first step in that is going to be measuring out this opening, cutting a piece of foam board that will sit down here on top of the lid, and designing that out. So stay with us. Alright guys, so the next step is to go ahead and caulk. We're going to caulk this edge here. We're going to caulk the corners. May end up caulking these joints just a little bit. This one's got a little bit on the back and a little bit on the front of that one. And I've got just a dark gray. I'm using OSI quad caulking, and this is an all-season formula formulated for outdoor UV resistance, waterproof temperatures up to 120 degrees and below zero. So we're going to go ahead and use that. We've got our caulking gun ready, and we've got some rags ready to go. So I'm a right-hander, so I'm going to caulk from here down towards myself here. Got a little bit of a gap right there that we're going to fill with caulk. Well, I'm actually going to tape these corners because I'm not real pleased with how that turned out. Just going to use some blue masking tape, and we'll go ahead and get that cleaned up and caulked. Alright guys, you can see that I've taped off the corners and the tops of these joints, and I've got them all taped off, and I've actually got them caulked, and now I'm just going to run through and clean them up with my fingers. Most of this caulk is going to come off, so you want to have plenty of rags handy and ready to go. Same thing, I like getting my fingers moist so that I can push that caulk in nice and clean, and all the way up over the top and into that corner. And then I'm going to fill this little gap that's on the back side of this guy here. Get that cleaned up. And I'm just using carb cleaner. Not great on your skin, it will dry out your skin, but it does a fantastic job of removing caulk. So I'm actually going to spray some on my rag here and go back over here. I made a little bit of a mess on this guy, and I'm going to clean this up as much as I can. All right guys, look at how well those corners turned out. Nice and clean. Can't see any of the gaps or cracks. The back is all done there. And that is it for caulking. Okay, next step guys is to measure this opening so that we can build the insulated lid for this guy. I've already taken the liberty of doing that, but just for the sake of the video, you want to measure the inside, and my actual measurement inside to inside on this edge is exactly 33 7/8 and exactly 33 1/4 on this side. And so we want this lid to fit snug, but not so tight that you can't lift it or get it out of there. So we're gonna subtract a 1/2 inch. That should give me a 1/4 inch all the way around to get it in there securely. So we're gonna go with 33 1/2. And then same thing on this edge. We measured it out to 41 inches and they're 40 7/8. So we're gonna subtract a 1/2 inch and we're gonna go with what did I say, 40, let's measure that again. Always double measure. So 41, we're gonna subtract a 1/2 inch. We're gonna go to 40 1/2 inches. I'm gonna make note of that. And now we're gonna go cut our styrofoam board. Okay, using the same methods as before, I've measured out 40 1/2 inches from the end, put a little mark, did that on both sides. Used my 4-foot level to draw a mark here on the foam board. And again, we're using 2-inch foam board for this project. So I don't want to cut my table here. I'm slide this level underneath. And then I'm going to go ahead and just make a score. There we have the foam insert for our lid. Okay guys, so the next step is to make the lid, and we're going to use the remainder of that sheet of plywood that we purchased, that we used on the pump side of the cabinet so that we could screw all of our plumbing into that. So this is the remaining section of that piece of plywood, and now we're going to measure and cut it so that it fits exactly over the top of the entire IBC tote, including the framing. And so I've already measured that out. I've used my 4-foot level, tape measure, and all that stuff, marked a line. I've got my saw guide on here, clamp and cut edge guide, and now we're just going to go ahead and cut that right here. All right, so that side is cut and done. Release this guy. And now we're going to make our second measurement and cut, which I wrote down on plywood here. So it was 44 3/4 by 52. So this should be my 52-inch measurement, which it is. And now we've got to measure 44 3/4. I'm going to inspect the edges here to see which one is the straightest. Got a little bit of damage on this, so I'm going to cut this side off. So we're going to go ahead and over here and measure over to check our measurements again, 44 3/4. So make a mark at 44 3/4. Now I'm not going to be able to use my saw guide on this one. So what I'm going to do is just make some marks along here at 44 3/4. So that I can use this guy, kind of like how we cut our styrofoam form board. I'm going to double check our measurements here. That does not look square. 44 3/4. 44 3/4. Okay, it is. You just got to trust your measurements. Alright, like I said, I'm not going to be able to use my saw guide on this one because it's not long enough, I don't think. Let's double check here, but I don't think so. Oh, it's like 2 inches. So, I'm just going to freehand this one. And I've got this plywood sitting on some pieces of just some extra styrofoam insulation so that I don't cut into my table here. I've got the top all made up. All right, so this is the nice side of the plywood. If you look, this is the ugly side of the plywood. So I think what I'm gonna do here, and depending on what you do and how you do it, I'm gonna glue that 2-inch piece of styrofoam board. Grab a piece of it here real quick. So this is our styrofoam board. I've got the piece that fits down inside the tub actually in the shop there. But it's gonna be glued down onto the top of this guy. Kind of like that, it's gonna be wrapped in Tyvek paper. And we're just gonna use a construction adhesive to glue that down onto this piece, and we'll clamp it on there and let it glue when we're ready to do that. But for now, this is kind of what it's gonna look like roughly. And I wanna use the nice side of this plywood on the bottom, so that when it's flipped up and you see the bottom of it, you're gonna see this side, which is the nicer side. This side, not so pretty side, is actually gonna be covered in siding and trim. And so I don't care what this side looks like, if that makes sense. Okay, as you guys can see, I've got the top set up on top of the crate here, on top of the IBC Tote, and it fits perfectly. So it does a good job of cutting it. It's nice and square. So this is kind of what it's going to look like once it's mounted to some extent. Now we'll have this piece of foam board will be mounted on the underside of this guy and inside, so that it insulates the top of this roof. And then basically what we're going to do here is, once I get this mounted up on the bottom and in place, actually prior to that, I've got to wait for my hardware to come. So what we're going to end up doing is a couple of different things. I don't have any of the trim pieces here with me right at the moment. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut, I'm going to rip this down again with my skill saw yet one more time, or maybe even my table saw. And I'm going to cut this right along here. I'm going to split this 1x6 in half, so there's going to be a 3-inch lip here, about like that. And I'm going to mount hinges to this in 3 locations. So there'll be a hinge here, and a hinge here. But I'm not going to do that until all of the siding and trim is done on this. And the reason being is that I'm going to trim this out with this same kind of siding here. It's going to be laid out, it's going to get trimmed across here. We're going to glue that to the top, so we are going to use construction adhesive in this case. We didn't use the construction adhesive on the sides here just because, again, I wanted to be able to take this off, remove it for whatever reason, if it gets damaged by a lawnmower or weather or whatever the case. I want to be able to pull this off and replace it relatively easy. The top, it's not going to matter as much, and I need it to be secure, and I don't want to shoot brad nails through this because it'll poke through the bottom. So we're going to glue the siding to the top of this guy, glue the trim, we're going to get all the trim on there, and then I'm going to rip this down, like I said, right along here, and we're going to mount our hinges to that. And then basically what will happen is this will fold up this way towards this side of the cabinet. Now, for you guys in your application, you need to kind of plan out where you want your lid and how you want it to fold up. You certainly don't have to do this by any means. You can use a removable lid. It's kind of a pain in the butt in my opinion. And so where I plan on placing this is going to be outdoors. This is going to be next to my hot tub in my yard. And so I wanted it so that I can flip this up and have it a little bit as a windbreak. So that when I'm in the tub, I'm not getting, it's really windy out where I live, so I'm not getting blasted by the wind. And so mine's going to be flipping up on this side. I do encourage you or recommend that you flip the lid on one of the long sides. The reason being is it's just going to support the weight of the lid a lot better. And you know, if you flip this thing up this way, it's just a lot more that could potentially catch in the wind. Now obviously if you have it indoors and that's not an issue, then you can put the lid wherever you want, but you do need to consider your clearance for this lid. If you have anything above or behind or around the tote, or the cold plunge, sorry. So consider where you want. You could do the same thing. I could rip this down on this back edge and put the hinges here so that it flips up this way, or vice versa. I can mount it on that side. The beauty of this is that in theory, you should be able to, if you change locations, if you move, or for whatever reason, if you need to move the hinge from this side to that side, all you'll have to do is unscrew it, turn it around, you can screw it onto the other side, and you'll have the same thing, because this will be permanently mounted to this board here, and there'll be trim on here. You won't be able to see this at all, but that'll be permanently mounted on there. And so I wish I had a couple pieces of scrap trim out here. I don't think I do. Kind of show you what I was talking about, but ultimately you can flip the lid around either side. So hopefully that makes sense. The next time you see this, I'm probably going to have the siding on the top of this guy, and I don't have the trim to trim it out yet. I'm going to have to go back to the lumber store and buy that, because I wasn't sure how I was going to do the lid yet, but that's where we're at for now, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so we're getting the lid done, and we're putting the siding, or the flooring I should say, on top of the lid now. And as I told you before, we are going to be using an adhesive to do that. Just like we did on the sides, the very first thing that I did was take a piece of the trim, and I ripped off, using my table saw, I cut this lip off, and I cut the edge off here on both sides so that I got a nice square fit on the back. And then, as you're going to see here in the demonstration, we've already got this piece, this next piece cut and ready to go. So this one will slide in like this, and we'll lock in place, and we'll glue it down. I did say before that I wasn't going to use brad nails to nail this down, that we were just going to use the construction adhesive, but I changed my mind, and I am going to use the brad nailer. I'm using a smaller 16 gauge brad nail. I'm using a 1-inch brad nail on these. Actually, I think it's even 3/4 inch brad nail on these, to nail it in on the sides and around the back. So let's go ahead and get this guy installed. Go ahead and get him glued up here, and we're just going to put a fairly generous amount of construction adhesive on here. And again, I don't really care if I have to replace this lid. It's not going to be the end of the world for any reason. So I want this stuff to stick down and be stuck on there as good as it can be. I'm trying not to get it on the fingers, because this stuff, I'm using a Gorilla Glue construction adhesive here. So just try to get our corners lined up, and pop it right down in there. This side looks good and flush. Let's go over and check this side. This side also looks good and flush. Maybe just tap that way. And then we'll go ahead and get this thing nailed in. And just like we did on the side, I've nailed these two joints, so now I'm gonna nail these two, but I'm not gonna nail here, and I'm not gonna nail there, because I want this next piece to be able to slip in really nicely. All right, so got that one done. I've already gone and trimmed off all these edges here. So the way we do this is just like we did on the sides. We're gonna dry fit it into place, make sure it's where we want it. Then we're gonna go over here, use our pencil, make sure it's nice and tight, and scribe on the bottom where we wanna make that cut with our miter saw. So there's our line. Go ahead and take that out to the saw and get that cut. Okay guys, so I wanted to show you my plumbing setup here. Relatively simple. I tried to do it with as few of fittings, elbows, unions, joints, all of those sorts of things to accomplish a pretty simple goal of pulling water out of the bottom of the tank here and circulating it from the pump up through the filter, up through the Venturi valve, which will have the ozone, and out to the jets. The one thing that I'm not sure how well it's going to work is that I had to fit this T here instead of in the center of between these two jets, more at this angle over here, and just because the reason being is that the filter location ultimately what you guys end up doing for your build is going to be completely dependent upon your situation, your build, and what you're going to do with the plumbing. For me, I decided that I want to build stairs over the top of the plumbing so that all of the plumbing will be housed inside of the stair box, and not have a separate box outside of the cold plunge. If you have a situation where you live in warm climates and you don't have to worry about freezing temperatures or anything like that, maybe you want to just leave your plumbing exposed on the outside or just put a small box over it or something, that's fine. There's a lot of guys out there and gals that use those plastic deck boxes that you can get off of Amazon to put their plumbing inside of that. I had considered that as well, and I think that's a great option for some folks. Again, for me, I wanted to have my plumbing hidden. My plan is, in the long term, is to have the chiller over on this space over here, and then I'll plumb hoses around to the pump that direction. But you kind of can see what I've got going on here. Obviously, this is the drain valve so that you can drain the tank independent of pumping the water back through there. This is one thing I just added. I actually originally had an elbow right there and completely forgot that I had wanted to put a drain valve in there as well. So that's an option. The fittings here on the bottom, I don't know if you can see those or not, but it's basically, I purchased this fitting off of Amazon. And one thing you need to really take into consideration is what type of fittings you have here. When you're shopping for an IBC tote, if you can find an IBC tote that has, so there's two options here. You either have 2-inch fine threads or 2-inch coarse threads. If you can find an IBC tote that has 2-inch fine threads, I highly recommend going with that version over an IBC tote that has coarse threads. The reason being is that the fine threads give you more real estate to screw this fitting onto. So that, in my case, mine's a 2-inch. Let me grab one of these so I can show you what I'm talking about. A 2-inch coarse thread fitting. And so, let me pull this guy out here so you can see it and what we're talking about. This is the exact thing that I have on there right now. So these are coarse threads. You can see how large those threads are. The finer threads will give you more real estate and less opportunity for leakage. These things are known for leaking really badly. So I haven't tested mine yet. I'm praying that it won't leak. But if you have the opportunity, buy one that's got fine threads instead of coarse threads. And then this is just reduced down to 3/4 fine thread NPT fittings. And so you can kind of see, I've just got that threaded on with some thread tape into a union, into the T here, and then you can see the rest of it. I've got a disconnect union here, a disconnect union here so that I can pull the pump at any time. Not really necessary to have two here. I didn't plan that out very well, but I wanted to be able to disconnect the pump from here. And so this one's totally unnecessary. I don't need a second one there. I could have just ran one there, but it is what it is. I have an extra one. And then I chose to tee up into the filter this direction and then up into the Venturi valve. And then you can see the rest of it. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into how to build this. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do this specific setup. You can do it a lot of different ways. You could run it out this way instead of up over the top. There's lots of different things you can do, but just wanted to show you my setup. Okay, so now you can see I've got the mock-up for the steps built. I didn't go into a lot of detail. I didn't video building these steps, but if that's something you guys are interested in, if you plan on building the exact same steps, I will put the cut list for these steps and the plans for these steps in the comments or in the description below. but it's really pretty easy. As you can see, these steps don't require any kind of special equipment. You can cut these with a skill saw, your miter saw. You could even cut them with a jigsaw if you had to. That would take a lot of time and be painful, but really fairly easy. And you need to understand that these steps that I've built is going to be using that same Trex decking for the tops and fronts. And so if you plan to use something different, you need to take that into consideration and just when you're building these steps. For reference, it is, I believe, it's going to be about an 11 inch step height, 11 inches this way, 11 up, 11, 11, and 11. But these top pieces are 10 inches each. And the reason being is that there's going to be a board here, and then there's going to be the boards here that go out, and there's going to be a little bit of a lip. So the total length of this bottom stringer is 30 inches. This is an 8-inch piece, 8-inch. These are 18 inches, so it's rising 10 inches. And remember, we're going to add an inch because of our Trex decking. So 8, 8, 18, 18, 28, 28. And then these are 10, 10, and 10. And again, this bottom stringer is 30 inches. If you're going to build these steps and it's going to be outdoors, you're going to want to use treated lumber. There's no rhyme or reason as to why I've got treated in some places and others, other than this is just some leftover lumber that I had, and I used the remaining lumber from these two pieces here on these extra pieces. So that's why. It's not a bad idea to use treated for the whole thing if it is going to be outdoors. Mine's going to be covered by the Trex decking, so I'm not really that worried about it. And so use what you got. If you want to use treated for the whole thing, that's fine too. And then the next step will be to actually put the stringers on the top. You want to determine your width. I originally was hoping to put the chiller inside of here. I don't know if I'm going to have enough room to do that, and I don't know if I have enough Trex decking to build this all the way out. I got to do some measurements. I may have to buy a couple more pieces of Trex, which I don't want to because that stuff's expensive. I think it's 18, 19 bucks a board. But if I only need 1 or 2 more boards, it's not the end of the world. So I am going to insulate these cavities with my leftover insulation, and we'll put some, I'll probably put a stringer across the front and a stringer across the back, just to kind of hold it all together and hold it square. So that's what I'm going to do next. Again, if this is what you're planning on doing, if you're planning on building some steps like this to hide your plumbing, I just gave you the cut list. Basically, you just need 2 of everything, and you can build this as well. So let's cut to it. The next scene you're going to have is hopefully with the stairs completely assembled, and I'm going to use the same siding on the outside since I have a box left of this outside. So it'll all be put together here shortly. All right, guys, I wanted to show you really quick. I put these stringers up, and I just used my Craig jig to basically toenail those in. And that's just to give those steps a little extra support in the middle, since that's a fairly long span. I think that's 40 some inches. The inside span is only 35, but that's quite a long span for Trex decking. So I put those stringers up and I put them in the middle where the 2 pieces will kind of overlap, so that obviously it gives you a little extra support on the step. So just wanted to show you that. Okay guys, so I'm showing you how I'm attaching the lid right now. And basically what I'm using is, so what we did is, once I built the lid, I used my table saw, and you could use a skill saw, and I cut this section of the lid off. And this is the exact width of the inside of our other boards here. And so what we want is, now what I'm doing is I'm attaching this to this piece so that this can hinge on here like that. And so what I'm using here for hardware is I'm using these T15, and these are, I believe, 2 1/4 inch screws. They're either 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. And I pre-drilled my holes. I've got 2 more to go in here. And I'm doing 6 total, so 2 on the ends and then 2 in the middle, and that'll be plenty enough to secure this to the top. And once that's done, then I will install these hinges, and these are self-closing, so they're kind of like gas-operated hinges, just so it's got a nice action to it. And then those will be mounted kind of like that. There'll be one on this side and then one on this side. And if I need a third one, I may end up having to put a third one in the middle, but I don't think I'm gonna need a third one. I think these will hold it just fine. So that's kind of what it's gonna look like. Not a huge fan of these exterior hinges. I just don't like the look of it on there, but I think it'll look fine. I'm gonna make some handles that will match the color of these, just using like a flat black. So I think that'll look pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these drilled in, and then we'll get the hinges mounted up. Okay, so got the hinges installed. Not a huge fan of these screws, so I'm gonna try to find some black ones at the hardware store in town this afternoon to replace those. But we got the struts inside installed, and I'm fairly happy with them. They're not perfect, but they work pretty well. It keeps the door open, obviously. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. They mount on the inside here. Obviously my screws are a little bit long, but there's gonna be styrofoam over this anyway, and I'm probably gonna paint this gray, I think maybe to match this as well. So the lid does close, but you can't just let it close on its own. You gotta assist it down, which is a little disappointing that those struts don't hold it up. They're supposed to be rated, I think, for, I don't know, 100 pounds or something like that. And this door's pretty heavy, but it's not terrible. I would say, I don't know if my kids would be able to lift it or not, especially once I get that foam on there. It's gonna be pretty tough, but anyway, that's the lid. All right, guys, so what I've done here is I closed the lid, actually crawled inside of the tote, closed the lid, had my headlamp on, and I used a Sharpie to draw the outline of where our insulation needs to go. So basically just traced the inside of the box with the lid closed, if that makes sense. And that gave me obviously this line here on the board. And then I made these cutouts on my styrofoam. So it's gonna sit somewhere kind of about like that-ish. We're gonna go ahead and wrap this styrofoam so that it's covered in Tyvek house wrap, so it's waterproof. And I think it'll just look a little bit better, hopefully. If not, I may end up just painting the foam. But I am gonna paint this edge as well. I'm gonna paint that the color match gray. And then we'll get this mounted up as well. So that's what that's gonna look like. Okay guys, so I wanted to show you the stairs. I got them all finished here, and they are all done. Nothing fancy. They are insulated in between the joists with our leftover insulation. And then here's the lid. I've got it drying right now. I decided to paint that. I didn't really like the house wrap color because it had the big Lowe's logo in the middle of it after wrapping it up with the Tyvek. So I decided to color match paint it. And hopefully the paint doesn't chip off of it. If it does, I'll end up just probably cutting the wrap off of there and doing something different, or just re-wrapping it with the Lowe's on there. But it's disconnected from the hinges right now, so it can dry, and then once the paint is dry, I'll glue that down in place. It's gonna be pretty much right where it's at. And then that's done. I got the, you can't see, but I got the LED light strip mounted up, and we got our ozone mounted on there and ready to go. So yeah, this thing is almost ready to be fired up. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow we'll fire it up. I do have a little bit more to do on the steps. I'm gonna put some trim on the bottom and then underneath each of the step rungs. But I ran out of that trim stuff. So that'll be another project for another day, but yeah, that's the stairs. They're all done. Okay guys, well, here is the finished product. It is all done. And I'm pretty happy with it for the most part. I got a little bit of a gap right there. Could be the floor, I'm not sure. I might end up putting something there, like a piece of like foam weather stripping or something, to get it up and running. But yeah, this is it. I'm really stoked with how well it turned out. The lid is not crazy heavy, but a little bit heavy enough. But again, like super happy with how the whole thing turned out. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in there. We're gonna get this thing filled up right now with water. I don't have a chiller yet. I doubt the chiller is gonna fit in there. So I think what I'm gonna end up doing is probably getting one of those commercial sized chillers and putting it on the back side, and then just plumb it in through the stairs into my plumbing. So that's kind of my ultimate plan for now. We're just gonna use ice blocks. It's winter here in Montana, so pretty chilly outside right now. I think it's only 30 degrees. It's gonna stay in my heated shop for now, until the summer when I can get it out of here. And I'll put it out next to my hot tub out in the yard. So there you go, that's it. That is the ice tote build. We did get the lights on, and I'll take another video once I get it filled up so that you can see the inside. I'm gonna wash the bottom of it out really quick and then get this thing filled up. All right, guys, so pump is on, jets are flowing. I like it, looks good. Our LEDs are probably like full shade or something. What that is. Lighting there. Pretty good pressure, looks like. Did have a little bit of a water leak. Of course, at the one place I suspected it, right at the valve there, but that's because when I pushed the stairs up, it bumped into the pump and put pressure on it, and so it was leaking. But everything else looks good, nothing else is leaking. I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie these wires up and get those cleaned up, and I'll probably have a different mounting system for a GFCI or something, or just another power strip there, but otherwise looks really good. That's the plumbing itself. I do have the ozone generator on and off. I got to read the instructions and figure out how to use that thing. So all right, here's the cold plunge in action. My water temperature is 50 degrees coming out of my well. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching this video. I apologize, I know it's really long, but I wanted to make it very thorough for you guys to show you step-by-step process on how to build a cold plunge using an IBC tote, and making it somewhat similar to this one. The last thing that I wanted to do really quickly was cover some of the mistakes that I made during this project, so that hopefully you will avoid those mistakes and not make them in the same fashion that I did. Overall, I'm very happy with this build. It works great. It is a lot heavier than I expected it to be, but that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. So something to just keep in your consideration. So first mistake number one that I made, you saw in the video pretty early on, was the location of the jets inside the tub. Obviously, I did not plan that out very well during the course of the build, and as you saw, I drilled through the plastic and hit the metal crossbar of the actual cage itself. So what I would recommend is drilling those holes in the tank prior to really doing anything else. Like, that could be one of the very first things you do once you get the top of the tank cut off and the top of the cage cut off, is I would plan out where you want your holes. And that way, you know, later on, if you go to spray paint your tank or whatever the case, you can just cover them with some tape or something like that. but you've already got an idea of where they're going to be, and that'll make it a lot easier. Something to take into consideration when doing that is if you decide to build stairs like I did to cover the plumbing, if you go outside of outside of the metal cage, like where I hit it, your plumbing's going to be pretty wide, and so it may affect your ability to build the stairs over it. Just keep that in mind, something to think about. You could definitely go narrower, but then your jets are going to be pretty close together. So just something to think about. That was my first mistake. The next big mistake that I made was regarding the lid itself. Pretty happy with how it turned out, except two things. A, you can already see that the paint is starting to come off, and this is only 3 days into the build. So I definitely wouldn't paint the Tyvek. I knew better, and I knew it probably wasn't going to stick, but I thought I'd try it anyway. But it is what it is. The second thing is that I used Gorilla Glue construction adhesive, thinking that would be really strong and it would do a really good job of holding the styrofoam to the lid here. However, I was miserably wrong. I came out this morning to cold plunge and the foam was inside the tank. I don't know why it took 3 days to fall off. I suspect that it might have had something to do with the ozone affecting the glue, but I'm not really sure because that glue sticks to everything. But anyway, it didn't stick, it fell off, and so what I ended up having to do is I took those Torx 15 screws, the 2.5-inch screws that we used back here to secure this on to the top of the tank. I used those with a large washer, pre-drilled a hole, and then just installed one on each corner, and that now holds the lid in. So just something to think about. The last thing are these hinges that I got off of Amazon. These aren't the hinges, but these are actually the gas struts. The hinges are on the other side. I'm not real thrilled with these. They're okay. They keep the lid open. They help the lid close. They're supposed to be, I think, 80 pounds. I'll put the specs on the video. They're supposed to be 80 pounds each, so 160 pounds of holding a lid. This lid doesn't weigh 160 pounds. It's heavy, but it's not that heavy. I would say it probably weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 pounds maybe. But I can't just let this go. Like, it would slam down. So just something to think about. Position of the handles. As you saw, I just lifted it from right here. I find that that's way more convenient than trying to lift it right here, even when I'm like standing on it. So something to consider. You may not even need a handle if you don't want to make one. And then the last tip that I want to give you really quick in regards to these handles specifically is if you decide to make something like this, I spray painted these and I spray painted the hinges to match so that they're all like an oil rubbed bronze color. But one thing you can do to get the screws to color match is you can stick them inside of a piece of an extra foam board that you have laying around. Just push them in a little bit so that they're sticking in there, and then spray paint them, color match them, let them dry obviously before you install them. And then just be careful when you install them and you'll have nice color match screw heads. So that being said, the last thing that I want to talk about is the plumbing itself. The last mistake that I made is that the stairs ended up being wider than I anticipated because when I built it, for whatever reason, I didn't keep in mind that the siding is about 1/4 of an inch, adds 1/4 of an inch on each side. So a 1/2 inch total to the width of the stairs, and I had built it so that the stairs would fit inside of the trim here, but that doesn't work. They actually sticks out, and it actually almost sticks flush, which doesn't look bad, but the problem is that my pump on the other side, if I'm not careful, if I tried to scoot this way to line it up, the stairs will run into the pump, and when that happens, the pump hits the fitting, that fitting that I got off of Amazon that fits from the IBC Tote into the plumbing that actually goes to the pump. If the pump gets bumped or moved in any way, like just the tiniest bit, it will cause that fitting to not sit right and the fitting will start leaking. I've had to take it off twice now and thread tape the heck out of it. So if you do end up getting a tote that has coarse threads and and you're going to use the drain valve on the tank as your outlet to suck water out of the tank. The thing that I would recommend is getting a product called Blue Monster thread sealant, and sealing up those threads really well with that. I'm gonna order some. Actually, I'm gonna look at the local hardware store to see if they have any, and I'm gonna probably take it apart and use that, because like I said, you breathe on it and it starts to leak a little bit. So in fact, I think it's dripping right now, but it's a really slow drip, thankfully. But other than that, that's the only other issue that I have with this. Otherwise, I'm very happy with this build. Guys, thanks for sticking with me. I know it's a long video. If you have any questions or comments, drop them below, please. I will answer them as quickly and as thoroughly as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you in building your own DIY cold plunge. It's very doable. This project took me, I don't know, 3 weekends, 4 weekends, something like that, and was relatively cost effective compared to, you know, the tens of thousands of dollars you could spend on a cold plunge like this. So please like and subscribe, give me a thumbs up, follow us for more content, and thanks for watching.